Are you struggling to teach yoga to beginners? I'm going to be sharing with you 6 tips to teach yoga to beginners. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and the bell button so you're notified every time I release a new video giving you yoga teaching tips. These are the exact tips I use at my brick-and-mortar yoga studio to make my beginner yoga class a massive success. Let's dive in. Tip number 1, name your yoga class beginner yoga. So I know that in the yoga community, it's really common. We love to have all levels yoga classes because we think if we have an all levels yoga class, we're inclusive, we can teach to anybody, and yes, yoga is for everyone, right? But I am a massive believer in picking a style of yoga and sticking to that. So really important when you're teaching to beginners is you create a beginner class so beginners feel safe. Because think about this, when you go to an all levels class, I know that this has happened to me. I attended an all yoga beach yoga class one time, and it was full, hundreds of people. And what I observed was there was a lot of people who were new to yoga who were completely lost. They were doing downward dog wrong and chaturanga wrong and just so confused during the whole entire class. And their alignment was way off, lots of opportunity for massive injury. And me, as a seasoned practitioner, I was bored because the class was boring. And so when we try to teach to everybody in one class, we actually teach to no one. So the first tip is really create a beginner yoga class where beginners feel safe, where everybody in that class is new to yoga. The beginner doesn't have to feel weird because they don't know what they're doing or they can't twist their body into the pretzel. Everybody is on the same page. You assume nobody knows how to do yoga. That's really how you create that safe environment for beginners to feel safe and actually create a learning environment. So really important. You can name the class beginner yoga, foundations, yoga basics, anything where people will know this is for beginners, where you're actually going to learn how to do all of the yoga poses. Which brings me to tip number 2, which is actually teach them how to do the yoga poses. So what happens again when you're in all level yoga classes, you can't break down the fundamentals because you have people who've been practicing for 10 years to people who this is their first class, right? So you can't really break down alignment and how to do the poses when you're teaching an all levels class. But in the beginner yoga class, the purpose of that class is to actually teach beginners how to do the yoga poses. And so teach them how, give them alignment cues, look at them, give them feedback, right? This leads me into tip number 3 is actually give your beginner yoga students feedback. So it could be verbal feedback like, Juliana, you got it, right? You ever have that yoga student who's like looking at you like, am I doing it right? When they're in the pose for the first time. So when you see that, you can give them verbal feedback of encouragement using their name, Juliana, great job. Or maybe they're in low lunge and their knee is way over their ankle, right? So you can say, Juliana, scoot your foot forward more so your ankle's underneath their knee, right? Or if you feel comfortable, you can go give a hands-on adjustment. You can go right next to them and show them how to do the pose. You can go up to them after class and say, hey, I observed you in low lunge and I just wanted to give you some alignment tips. Can I help you get into the pose, right? And then work with them one-on-one after class. But it's really important that you are observing them and actually giving them feedback on if they're doing the pose right, so you can acknowledge that for them, and if they need to adjust something, right? This is also going to really create a special relationship with you and your students. You're going to build a really deep trust factor. Because I know also for me, something that made me upset. I was practicing yoga for years with the yoga teacher, and then I learned later that I was doing downward facing dog wrong, right? And I was kind of upset because it's like, why did my yoga teacher tell me, right? So during beginner yoga, that's such a great opportunity to really give them feedback. Yes, you're doing it right. No, here's how to do it correctly. It could be a verbal adjustment, a go next to them and show them, a conversation after class, or a hands-on adjustment, but it will make such a huge difference for your students. Give them feedback. Give them personalized feedback. Number 4 is teach in a progressive manner. So this is really important to make your class feel inclusive, right? Even in beginner, there are different levels of beginner. So every single pose you teach can really be broken down into levels or variations. And so it's really, really important that you're teaching level 1, which is like the easiest level of the pose first, and the whole entire class is doing that together. Then you give an option to try level 2, and you let them know how to know if it's appropriate for them to try level 2. Then you give an option for them to try level 3. So instead of just saying, if you can't do this, take child's pose, or if you can't do this, use your block, the whole class is doing it together. So if somebody is at level 1, they don't have to feel bad that they're at level 1, right? And it also empowers them to know the steps to get to improve, to get to level 3, right? Like, it's to celebrate when they maybe try level 2 for the first time, or maybe try level 3. It's a very empowering and inclusive way to teach. So let me give you a few examples. Let's start with tree pose. So how I would teach tree pose in a beginner yoga class is come so that your feet are hip distance and parallel. Take your hands to your hips. Shift your weight to your left foot. Lift your right heel. Turn your right knee out towards the right. Bring the bottom of your right foot to your ankle so your heel goes right above your ankle. Root down through that left foot, lengthen through the crown. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. You can stay right here, or option to bring the palms to press in prayer. You can stay right here if you want to challenge your balance. So take your right foot to your calf. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Invitation to stay here, or if you want even more of a challenge, reach your arms all the way up. And if you fall out of it, don't worry, come back into it. So you see how I taught 3 levels, and we all started with level 1, right? We all held level 1 for a breath, and then we moved on to level 2 and 3. Let's use another example of cow face pose. So if I were to teach cow face pose in beginner, this is what I would do. Bend your right knee, cross your right foot over your left knee, ankle to knee alignment. Open your arms wide out to a T. Give yourself a hug. Left arm comes on top of right. Option 1 is to stay here just like this. Option 2 is to drop your right knee on top of your left knee. If you try this and you notice you're leaning to a side or there's a lot of space here, that's how you know to go back to option 1. You can keep the arms just as they are, or maybe bring the backs of the palms to press. Wherever you're at, we'll breathe together. Deep breath in, deep breath out. And release your arms all the way down. So those are my options here. Option 1, option 2, option 3, right? In beginner, I'm not going to give this option because it is a little too advanced, in my opinion, for beginner yoga. So I also pick my levels based on who I'm teaching, right? If I was teaching cow face in intermediate or advanced class, I might start here and then give the option to go here and then do full cow face arms and then fold, right? Maybe those are my options, right? So you're picking your levels based on who you're teaching, and that's appropriate for the class. So let me know in the comments if this is making sense on how to teach in a progressive manner. And if you have any questions about a specific pose, how would you teach that pose in a progressive manner, also drop it in the comments. I'd be happy to make a video for you on that. So number 5 is teach using props and demo with props, right? Make props normal and cool. So there's kind of like this stigma around props. Is like you only use props if you can't do the pose. In beginner yoga, I was always making props not an option. It was something we were all doing as a group. Even though I didn't need the props in some of the poses, right, I was still demoing with the props, right? So this is really important, and I'll give you 2 examples of what I mean by this. So let's say for low lunge, this is how I would teach low lunge in beginners. So take your hands on your blocks, shoulders underneath wrists. Inhale, extend your right leg behind you. Exhale, right knee to nose. Step your foot between your hands. Take your blocks now to the tall height. Press into the blocks, lift the chest. Tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, extend through the back foot. Redrop the knee, untuck the toes. Draw the shoulder blades together, lift the heart. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Invitation to stay here or take your hands to your thigh. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Option to stay here or reach your arms all the way up. Exhale and release. So you see how it wasn't, what I didn't do was come into low lunge this way and say, if you can't do low lunge, grab your blocks, right? That is a very defeating way to teach the pose. So another example of this, of making props cool and making them normal in your class, is in modified hand to big toe pose. So if this was my peak pose, what I would say is take your blocks right out in front of your feet, take your hands to your hips, shift your weight to your left foot, lift your right foot, place it right on top of your block. Option 1 is to stay right here, just like this. Option 2 is to lift the toes up off the block. Right? So we're all using the prop together. We have option 1 and then option 2. Right? And in beginner, I would never do this. Right? That's too advanced for my beginner class. So you as the teacher, you're making props normal, part of the practice, and cool, and you're also demo using them. I love this at my studio. So I opened my studio in 2019, and we provided all of the props for our members. After, what happened in 2020, we stopped providing props, but our members would literally bring with them 2 blocks, a strap, a blanket, and a bolster, and it was totally normal. And when new people would come, we didn't have any props to share after, what happened in 2020. And after like one class, the next time they were like, I need all of those props. I need all those props. So it was like just so cool to really make props cool and make props like the norm. And it's really empowering for your students because they make poses more accessible. And they also deepen poses too if you're an advanced practitioner. So tip number 6 is create a beginner yoga series and repeat it. Beginners need repetition, right? Beginners need repetition. So I invite you to create a beginner yoga series and repeat it, even if you teach regularly yoga basics, fundamentals, beginner yoga. At my studio, I created an 8-week beginner yoga curriculum, and I taught that on repeat. I actually have another video for free on YouTube called How to Sequence a Yoga Class for Beginners, where I teach you what to put in a beginner yoga class sequence and give you a beginner yoga class template, so you can check that out as well. So let me know in the comments if these tips were helpful, and if you're struggling to sequence a yoga class for beginners, I'd love to help. I actually offer my done-for-you 8-week beginner yoga curriculum, so you can steal my yoga curriculum, my yoga class plans for beginners, and I'll have that link to purchase it in the description. So yeah, I hope that this was helpful. Bye, everyone.